Today we are going to create the audio manager. So we're going to implement audio to our game. So let's go and let's create a new class and let's call it audio manager. Alright, so this script is gonna contain the list of sounds. So first of all, we of course need to implement a new public class that we will call sound. So first of all, it needs of course the name. So let's say string, and let's put it something like a name. And then it needs a public getter so that we could get this name. Alright, so after we added the name, the other thing we need is of course the audio clip. So let's create a new private and let's put in the audio clip. Let's call it something like clip. And then let's create a public getter that we will return. We'll return the private variable's value. Then what we need is of course some parameters. So let's go and let's create a public struct and let's call it something like sound parameters. And this sound parameters struct is gonna contain a couple of values like volume, pitch, and maybe to determine if the sound needs to loop or if it doesn't. So for that, let's simply create a new public float and let's call it something like volume. Then let's create another float and let's call it pitch. And then let's create a public bool and let's simply call it something like loop. Okay, so now let's go to our sound class and let's add in the sound parameters. So let's create a private sound parameters. Alright, so after we have parameters, the only thing we need is simply the audio source. And the audio source is going to be the reference to the audio source that we will instantiate. So let's simply put in the public audio source and let's call it something like source. And then let's make it simply hide in inspector because we don't want to edit this. We will reference this audio source whenever we instantiate or initiate all the sounds at the start of the game. Alright, so afterwards, the only thing that this sound class needs is a couple of methods. And these methods are of course to play the sound and to stop the sound. So let's go here and let's say public void play and another void which is going to be stop. So inside of our play method, what we need first of all is we need to assign a clip to our source. So let's say source.clip is equals to a clip. Then what we need is we need to assign the parameters. And that's it. So the very last thing we need to do is of course simply play the sound. So let's say source.play. And then afterwards we need to implement this stop. And then of course inside of our stop method, the only thing we need to do is simply say source.stop, which is simply gonna stop playing the sound. Before we move to audio manager, let's make sure that these two, that this class and this struct is both serializable. So let's simply put an attribute which is system.serializable. Let's copy this and let's put it right here. So now both of these, this struct and this class are both serializable, so we're going to be able to view it in our inspector. Alright, so afterwards let's go to audio manager and let's create the actual audio manager. So the first thing is we need to implement the singleton pattern. So to do that, let's put in the public static audio manager and let's call it something like instance. Alright, so the singleton pattern is pretty much allows you to have the instance of itself. So for example, whenever we create the audio manager, we will reference to this instance itself, so this class. And then we can also really easily access this instance from other scripts. So let's say for example, so now we implemented the public static audio manager, which is going to be our instance. So now of course we need to reference ourselves to this instance. But if something is already referenced inside of this instance, that means that audio manager exists already in the scene. So then we are going to simply remove this audio manager because we don't want to have multiple audio managers. So first of all, let's implement the void, which is going to be start. And then what we need to do is we need to check if instance is not equals to null. And if it's not equals to null, what we're going to do is we're going to simply destroy this game object, because that means that the audio manager already exists in the scene and we don't need to create a new one. But if it doesn't exist, meaning that instance is equals to null, then what we can say is we can see that the instance is going to be equals to this, and that pretty much means that the instance is going to be this audio manager. Okay, so the next thing we want is we want to make sure that this audio manager does not destroy itself when we load the new scene or when we unload this scene. So the easiest way to do this is simply call don't destroy unload, and then put in the game object, which is this audio manager game object. So then whenever we, for example, change scenes or when we restart the game, we won't restore the audio. All right, so the next thing we want to do is, of course, to create the list of sounds. So let's create a serialized field. Let's make a sounds array, and then let's call it something like sounds. Then the next thing that we want to have is the reference to our source prefab. So we are going to create an audio source, and let's call it something like source prefab. So for now, let's simply go and let's create a new method that we'll use to initiate sounds. And let's call this method something like init sounds. And what we're going to do inside of this method is simply loop through all of the sounds that is inside of the sounds array. And let's say this is going to be something like sound. So the only thing we want to do at the moment is simply instantiate a new audio source. So let's go here and let's say audio source, and let's put it something like source is going to be equals to audio source instantiate. And then of course we put in the original object, which is the reference object. And what we need to put is of course the source prefab, and the parent is going to be this game object. All right, so the next thing is of course to change some information of the source. So let's say that the source dot name is going to be equals to sound dot name, and the sound dot source is going to be equals to this new instantiated source. And that's all we need to do for initiating sounds. So let's simply collapse this method and let's create a couple of more. So the first method is of course to play the sound. So let's create a public void, and let's call it something like play sound. And of course, for us to be able to know what kind of sound to play, we need to put in the parameter, which is going to be the name of the sound. And of course we need another method for stopping the sound. So let's simply say void stop sound, and then let's put in a parameter which is also the name of the sound. All right, so what we need to do now is of course to try to get the sound by the name that we send. So to do that, we are going to create another method which is going to return the sound, and let's call this something like get sound. And of course we need to put in the name as a parameter, and the only thing this method will do is it will loop through all of the sounds, and it will check if any of the sounds match with the name that we send. So we say loop through all of the sounds, and if sound.name is equals to the name that we send as a parameter, that means that we found the sound, so we can simply return this sound. And if we haven't found anything, we're simply going to return nothing. All right, so inside of our play sound method, let's simply, first of all, let's get the sound. So let's say sound. Let's create a new variable. Let's call it sound. And let's say get sound, and let's pass in the name that we just got as a parameter. And then let's simply say if sound is not equals to null, meaning that we retrieved some sound, we are simply going to say sound.play. But if we haven't retrieved any sound, that means that this sound by the name that we just sent does not exist. So we can debug, for example, some warning to indicate that. So let's say something like debug.log warning, and then let's simply say something like sound by the name, and then let's put in the name that we just sent is not found. So it will indicate that the sound by this name is not found, so that we probably made some mistake. And we can also say that, for example, issue occurred at audio manager dot play sound. All right, so we're pretty much done with our play sound method. So now let's go to our stop sound method, and let's do that as well. And this is going to be exactly the same. except we are going to call stop instead of play. So let's simply copy this entire thing, let's paste it, and if we have a sound, we're simply going to say sound.stop, which will simply stop the sound from playing. Let's also change the message and we are good to go. So we implemented all the methods and we're pretty much ready to use this audio manager. So at the start of the game, let's also make sure to initiate sounds. What we can also do is we can, for example, say serialize field, let's put in a string, and we can say something like startup track. So for example, like a start music that we want to play, and we can check at the start that if string.is empty or null, the startup track string, and if it's not equals to null, then what we can do is we can simply say play sound, and we can put in the startup track string. So we're simply checking if our startup track string is not equals to null. If it's not equals to null, we are going to play the track that we just said we want to play. So let's go back to Unity and let's create this audio manager. So let's go here and let's create a brand new empty game object. Let's call this something like audio manager. Let's put in the audio manager component, and of course now we need the sounds. So first of all, let's reference this source prefab. So for that, let's simply create a brand new empty game object and let's call it something like source prefab. Now let's put in the component, which is going to be audio source, and let's also disable play on awake because we don't want that. And afterwards, let's simply go to our prefabs folder and let's drag and drop the source prefab and let's make a prefab. And let's simply delete this because we don't need it. And then inside of our audio manager, let's reference the source prefab, and that's it. So now we need, of course, to implement the sounds. Alright, so I also found a couple of music clips that you can use. So this is the correct sound. This is the sound for the countdown timer. And this is the sound effect when we get the resolution screen and we get the wrong answer. Alright, and these are the musics. So we can go back to our audio manager. So in total, we're going to have 4 sounds, at least for now. So let's go and let's create these sounds. So the first sound is going to be correct sound effect. And for the sound itself, we are going to use this clip. Then, of course, we need to put in some parameters. At the moment, we have this field that allows us to go even to the negative values, which obviously we don't want. We want to go from 0 to 1. So for that, we need to include the range attribute. So let's go back to our audio manager. Alright, so inside of the audio manager, let's go to sound parameters. And in here, we have these 2 float values, and we want to add the range. So let's add the range to the volume. And I say that we want to have the range between 0 and 1. Alright, so let's also add the slider, the range to the pitch, and the pitch usually goes between -3 and 3. Alright, so let's go back to Unity, and as you can see now we have these sliders, which definitely is much better. I tested it before, so for the volume I kind of want to put this to 0.4. The pitch, obviously let's put it to 1, and we don't want to loop this sound. So for the next sound, we want to create the incorrect sound effect, and for the clip, let's use it the incorrect sound effect. For the parameters, let's make them completely the same as the previous sound. Alright, now let's go and let's put in some countdown sound effect, because we will need this sound whenever we count down with the timer. For the sound, let's use this sound. And for the parameters, let's make the volume to be something like 0.2. And the pitch, let's make it something like 1. But actually, let's make the pitch something like 0.85. And for the volume, let's leave it something like 0.4. That should be okay, we'll see. Now let's go to the last sound, which is of course the music. Let's call it something like game music. And then we can of course reference the music. I'm going to use this sound, which is the one I used before. So for the volume, let's put it something like 0.2. For the pitch, let's make it to 1. And let's also make it to loop, because we want to repeat this music whenever it stops playing. Alright, so we created all the sounds. Now we can make the startup track to be something like game music. So whenever the game is going to start playing, this startup track, which is the game music, is gonna start playing as well. What we need to do now whenever we implement the sounds is of course to play the sounds inside of our scripts. And let's go to our game manager, and we want to play the countdown sound whenever we go down with the timer. So let's go to start timer, and whenever we decrease the time, let's say that we want to play the sound. So let's access the audio manager, then let's access the audio manager's instance, and then we can simply call the play sound method, and of course put in the name of the sound, and the name of the sound is going to be countdown sound effect. Then we can copy this line, and we also want to play some other sounds, like whenever we get the resolution screen. And for that we need to go to UI manager, or what we can actually do is, instead of putting this inside of the UI manager, let's go to our game manager and let's go to our accept method. And whenever we accept the answer, and then what we want to do is we want to check if the answers are correct. So let's say is correct, and if it's correct, then we want to play the correct sound, and if it's not correct, we want to play the different sound, which is the incorrect sound. So let's say that if it's correct, we want to play the correct sound effect, and if it's not correct, we want to play the incorrect sound effect. All right. So I actually noticed that we want to make one more thing. So we are calling this wait till next round quarantine, but we don't want to call this if our type is finish. So if we finish the game, we don't want to wait till next round. We simply want to don't do anything. So let's go here and let's say if type is not equals to finish, then we simply want to copy this and put it here. All right, so let's try to play the game and let's see if our sounds are going to play. As you can hear, the music is playing. And if we answer the question, we get this sound effect. And also the timer also has a sound, and that is pretty cool. All right, so as it appears, we have some issues. So let's go to our game manager. I'm sure you noticed before in the previous lessons. So when we are displaying the answers, we are checking if our current question answer type is equals to single. And if it is equals to single, we are doing a for each loop to reset all the previously picked answers. And then we are simply clearing the list and adding the new answer. But I completely forgot to, or accidentally placed it 2 lines inside of the for each loop, which of course we don't want. We simply just cut this and place it outside when we finish doing the for each loop. So we are doing a loop, and then we're simply clearing the list and then adding the new picked answer. So this is a bit awkward mistake that I made, but just checked what answers I picked after I pressed accept, and I noticed that I haven't picked any answers, and obviously that is because of this little mistake. So if we try to play the game and we get this answer, we appear to have a no reference exception. Let's see why. Apparently the audio instance is null. I'm not sure why I'm getting this error. Let's try to play again. Alright, so I noticed that I made a couple of mistakes inside the audio manager. So let's go and let's fix those mistakes. So let's go to our audio manager, and what I did wrong is, of course, I'm setting the instance at the start function, which obviously I need to do before the start, because I am displaying the question at the start of the game inside of the game manager. And whenever I'm displaying the question, I'm also playing some sounds, which is, for example, the timer sound. So for that, of course, I need to create an awake function, which is called before the start function. Then I simply want to copy this, place it inside of the awake function. And what I also want to do is I want to initiate the sounds also in awake function, because like I said, I am playing the sound at the start of the game in a game manager. So if we haven't initiated the sounds yet, we won't be able to play them. So that makes sense. So let's simply go and it should be all okay. Let's try to, for example, to go back and let's see if this is working. So let's try to play the game. As you can see, we are playing the sound and we are not getting any issues. Alright, and that's all we need to do. I feel like we are pretty much done with our project. We already made the functionality. We made the audio manager. I think the last thing that we need to do, which we will do in the next video, is editors, custom editors for the question, because at the current moment our question looks really messy. So we need to change that by writing a custom editor scripts. So pretty much the only thing is left is just simply finalizing the project. And then you can of course go crazy and create whatever you desire, completely up to you what you do after. And if you, for example, have any issues by creating specific thing that you want to add to this game, you can always leave a comment with a question, and I'll try to answer the question to solve the issue that you're having. Or what you can also do is you can join the Discord server. So I think that's all we need to do with this video. We pretty much made everything we need to make, so we will continue in the next video. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you very soon in the next lesson.